Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today at the last day of the Paris Air Mobility event. I think it's been a great success and really pleased to see such a great turnout today. Very excited about this morning's panel. We're going to be discussing public acceptance of advanced air mobility. It's a very important topic, as we all know. I'd like to introduce our panelists quickly. To my left is Ajay Shivali, Managing Director at Deloitte Consulting. To his left is Gregory Davis, the President and CEO of Eviation. We have Andreas Perotti, the Chief Marketing Officer for Europe of EHang. Colin Shunk, the Senior Manager for Strategic Innovation and Intelligence at Lufthansa Innovation Hub. And we have Katharina Wagner, Head of Business Development at Autoflight. Thank you for our panelists for joining us. So, I want to begin this conversation by kind of starting very big picture. In theory, right, eVTOLs are clean, they're sustainable, they're quiet. So, why is this something that generates a lot of public skepticism, if not even hostility in some cases? What are the major hang-ups to advanced air mobility and urban air mobility, and what are the main concerns that this industry needs to address if we're going to achieve commercialization and eventually mass public adoption? So to kick it off, maybe we could start with Ajay and then take it down the line.
Yeah, great question, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. This is, for people that work in aerospace, Disneyland. This is such an exciting place to be. So many beautiful products here, and I'm really excited to see how far we've evolved in the eVTOL industry. It's just really gratifying to see the progress that we've seen from some really innovative, amazing companies. I want to say that up front. To answer the question, Ben, I think a couple of things in our research as we look at acceptance and what might be some of the barriers. I think we classify them into a couple of areas. One is around concerns around pollution, and when I say pollution, it's around noise pollution, visual pollution. I think there's a concern that when this gets up to scale and operates, we're going to be in dense urban environments most likely, and so there's some concerns around that. I think that's going to be that has to be addressed at some point in terms of the pollution side of this. On the infrastructure side of this, I think there's going to be concern around where do we put the infrastructure, right? If you've noticed any dialogue around expansion of existing airports, that tends to be a bit of a challenge, right, in the public. Even adding a runway to an existing airport tends to generate a lot of interest in the public and a lot of concern around that. So I think that's the other angle that we also, in our polling shows that's going to be another angle that should be looked at. The third would be, because of this adding to the existing transportation system, I think there's an angle of, does it add to the existing transportation system or does it replace some of the congestion we're seeing? If it's the latter, I think the acceptance is going to be higher. If it's the former, where it feels like it's going to add some more to the existing transportation system, I think that's going to be another challenge in my mind.
Ben, thanks for having us. This is a lot of fun to be here, and we're talking about coming into the advanced air mobility sector, and at Eviation, we're taking a different approach. So rather than urban air mobility, we're actually looking at regional air mobility. And for us, our model is built around certifying a conventional takeoff and landing aircraft that operates from existing airports using existing airspace. The electric plane is going to be quieter than a traditional turbine aircraft, and of course, being fully electric, there are no specific emissions. There's literally no tailpipe on the plane. So for us, the go-to-market is about reclaiming the existing infrastructure, the airports that have been built up throughout North America and throughout Europe and around the world, and then just offering a more convenient option to travel. So, again, our approach is to use what we've got, take the electric technology, evolve it, and then deploy it through the existing network.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for the invitation. First of all, I'm pretty happy that we achieved somehow industry acceptance, and thanks to Paris Air Show for devoting so much space and focus on the whole topic. It really shows eVTOLs, advanced air mobility, are here to stay and have arrived in aviation industry. To answer your question, how can we expect from the public to accept something they don't know, they never heard of or hardly heard of, they never tried, they never saw, and above everything else, they don't see a personal connection to? And here I get to the major point. It's fantastic to have the arguments of sustainability. It's fantastic to have the arguments of noise reduction, meaning tackling some flaws of a helicopter business. But is it really creating a connection to the wider public? And we always say the innovation in eVTOLs is not lying in the way how we transport people or goods from A to B. We have it since decades. It's called helicopter. But a helicopter is a very elitarian thing. A helicopter is very noisy. It's disturbing you when if a police or ambulance helicopter flying above your houses in a city, for example. And therefore, we say the innovation in what we are doing is making the functional principle of helicopters affordable for a wider public. So it's all about democratization of the lower airspace and of air travel. And here, the main argument is not sustainability, it's not noise, it's not any KPIs or the question if it's a multi-rotor or a fixed-wing system. It's all about the end pricing for the consumer. And therefore, we need to have approaches where the whole value chain is as lean as possible. It's one thing to have a fancy-looking, sophisticated vehicle where we as aviation guys, as aviators, as aviation enthusiasts say, wow, that's amazing, it's really fascinating. But that's not important. We need to be as lean as possible in everything what we do. The minimum viable. That's one point. The other point is we need to get it out there. We need to let the people see it, touch it, try it, feel it, and see a personal connection to that. And we have a lot of experience in that, not just from empiric data and certain surveys, but we are actually flying people already in our domestic market right now based on special permits, hopefully very soon based on a CAC certification. And we really see how people react when they use it. And at the end of the day, technologies and innovation will succeed, which improves the daily life of people. And these technologies have the potential to make regions small, to relativize distance. And look what's going on in the world. We have urbanization, people are moving to cities because all the jobs are there. At the same time, they live in shoe boxes or have to move out into the suburbs where they commute back in 2 hours. That's crazy. This is not what we should do. And I truly believe that our technologies have a very high potential to change that. Of course, it's the beginning. I always say in the 2020s, we're in a similar maturity stage like the car industry in the 1920s. Is everything perfect? No. Do we still have a lot of question marks? Yes. But it's there, it's working, it's serial version 1.0. So let's get it going.
Thank you. So from our point of view, actually, so first of all, I would actually agree with many what you've said so far. So I will actually not repeat it. But from our point of view, to assess and talk about public acceptance at this stage is rather difficult simply because we do not have the service in the air yet. So how we approach this is to look how can we aim acceptance on 2 levels. The first one is actually get the customer, the potential target group, to accept the new solution. So they need to feel that it's safe, for example. They need to see the benefit so that we get the target group into the product in the end. And the other one is actually the general public, what we call the average population, who will at the beginning not be able to use that solution simply because they are not able to afford it. And for that group, we also need to somehow include them and build up a narrative that shows to them the benefits that they will also have from the beginning on, and later when it kind of scales and the cost curve goes down, then they will potentially also be able to use that solution sometime down the road. So we actually look at it towards 2 target groups here. And all the other challenges that we already know today that we need to address, like noise, privacy concerns and so on. I think that's pretty good, but I think we will also see down the road that there are many other challenges coming up that we need to address to make the customer feel safe in such a vehicle. For example, we had a discussion with someone who did a study on public acceptance in the US and what the customer actually expects from like an AAM aircraft. And the answer was quite surprising because they said, well, we expect to have a door, like every passenger wants to have a door to exit the aircraft quickly. And the second one, we expect to have a crew on board to cater for the passengers. So I think we need to somehow also educate the potential customer how the solution in the end looks like.
Well, thank you, Ben, for having us. And thank you very much for being here and listening to this panel. I'm very, very excited that we are having this AAM hall because we are out of flight. We are an OEM. We are building an aircraft, which you can actually see just outside of Chalet A200. It's a real aircraft out there. And it is a challenge. We do come up with all these questions all the time, but you know, it feels like Andreas actually has read my speech because you mentioned the two key points, I believe, and many of you have. It all comes down to accessibility and trust. And when we look into the past, there have been a lot of examples of technical innovation, be it chemistry, physics, also mobility. There was always skepticism at the beginning when technical innovation and new developments hit. Let's look, for example, I think it was 1854, when the first trains were riding. People thought we all will get seizures because it's so fast and everybody was going to die on a train. Or the first car, which had a speed world record of 14 miles per hour, people were afraid it's going to be way too fast. And now, 2023, we're at the same point for aviation. Electrical vertical takeoff landing aircraft, right? Everybody thinks this is going to be crazy. And that's because trust is missing. And how do we build trust? That's a very good question, which is not so easy to answer, or probably it is easy to answer. It's the only way to do it is not through studies, it's not through facts, it's through connection. You called it connection. We call it accessibility. So people have to experience it. People have to see it fly. People have to be able to see the aircraft, sit inside, feel it, and just realize how cool it actually is. By the way, you can sit in our aircraft. It is very cool. I'm very happy that we are on a good way to start building trust also in Europe. We are flying on a daily basis on our test sites in China, where we also invite selected clients and investors to visit our test flights. But just this morning, we announced a cooperation with Group ADP, where we're intending to actually showcase our flights, our aircraft next year to Olympic Games here in Paris. So I hope we'll bring accessibility to all of you and we'll be able to showcase it here. And just the second point, again, accessibility also has to do something with affordability. Colin mentioned that people will not be able to afford it. And that might be true in the very first use case, very beginning. But how we tackle this is by controlling our supply chain and actually producing the majority of the aircraft, the majority of the parts in-house in our factories in China. So we are very confident that our aircraft will be operationally and in terms of acquisition costs so affordable that it will be accessible to the majority of people even from the beginning.
So I want to take a step back for a second. When we talk in this industry about public acceptance, it's kind of taken for granted almost that the public may not accept this technology initially. But I'm curious, is it possible that maybe that fear is a bit overblown? And how can we even quantify, or measure the public's attitude about something that maybe they're not even aware of? So anyone who wants to take this one?
I'm going to chime in.
Yeah.
The aerospace industry, first and foremost, is about safety, right? So before any of us step on any kind of aircraft and fly as a passenger, that aircraft is going to go through a rigorous regulatory process that proves that it is safe. right? So in terms of what we need to do to actually get people on these planes, there is a certification process, whether you're in Europe, North America, New Zealand, or anywhere around the world, that you need to follow to get through. We were given the opportunity at Aviation to speak with the ICAO Council about a week and a half ago. And we were discussing with ICAO, what do we need to do as an industry to make sure that we can actually have our technology adopted? And I took the opportunity to say, look, sustainability in aviation, because I do feel that this is actually a sustainability question from a social acceptance point of view. But sustainability in aviation requires that we get our new technology out as soon as we can worldwide. It's a worldwide issue. We need to eliminate carbon from the atmosphere that we're currently pumping out. You know, right now, our industry, the aerospace industry, is 3% of all global CO2 emissions. By 2050, that's going to be 50% of CO2 emissions unless we get our products out, our clean electric products into the market. And what I said to the ICAO was, you know, a couple of decades ago, we had a noise problem in the industry, right? We talked about noise as part of what we're all working on here. I think all of our products are intended to be very quiet and very comfortable. But ICAO actually came forward and generated a new annex that said, hey, these are the standards that we're going to apply globally, that we're going to accept as all of the member countries so that we reduce noise emissions. Today, we're all talking about reducing noise emissions, we're talking about cost and affordability, but what we need to is to actually come as an industry globally and say, hey, these are the standards for getting electric aircraft into service. And so social acceptance and public acceptance, you know, there's a method to this. We go through the regulatory process, we show that our products are safe and certifiable, and then we bring them to market, and then people fly on them.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Greg on that. That I think the safety, just by virtue of the certification process, will be assumed. That'll be a given when these products get into operation. We talked a lot about the affordability and the cost. I think that's also going to be because this market is going to compete with, you know, the Ubers of the world, right? So that it's, as we think about multimodal transportation, that's the bar that this transportation is compete with, especially in an urban environment. I think the third angle to this that we've done some research and looked at is the time factor to this, because a big value proposition for this will be the amount of time saved when you get from point A to point B. So, for example, for those of us that have been trying to get here the last 4 days, it's been, and get out of here, it's been quite the challenge, right? And of course, we added rain to that today, and you can blame Greg and me for that. We come from Seattle, so we brought the rain with us. But that, I think that the time it takes, and that's point to point. So today, if you compare yourself to getting an Uber, it's from the point you demand it, it shows up, picks you up, delivers you to your destination. That's the full time. So in the AAM transportation model, that total time of when you demand it, if you have to, for example, go through a vertiport, go through security, get on the aircraft, get delivered to wherever, let's say you're going to Charles de Gaulle from Centre Paris, that entire time has to be comparable or better, ideally much better, than your traditional form of transportation. I think that's going to be the key that turns, in addition to the cost and the safety, which I think that's a given, that is going to be another key element in our mind that turns public perception positive.
Well, I mean, your question implies a bit that there is a lot of empiric and validated data for that people don't like it. I mean, there is for some markets, but for many there is not. And even in a not as technology-affine market like in Europe compared to APAC or the United States, for example, I just want to quote the study from EASA about public acceptance from May 2021, where more than 80% are quite positive for UAM services, and even more than 70% would be willing to try. But honestly speaking, I mean, what is the major discussion point in our industry? It's the topic of safety. And yes, safety is the most important thing. Yes, there has to be zero tolerance and zero failure and zero compromise on the topic of safety in aviation. I'm very proud that in the general aviation and in commercial aviation we achieved a very high level of safety, and we have to keep that, of course, in eVTOLs. But on the other hand, how can we judge the public for having fear and risks if even ourselves only talk about the things which can happen, only talk about it has to be safe. Of course it has to be safe. Why do we discuss so much about that? We should discuss much more on business cases, on how we get it done, on the chances, on the opportunities. And the pricing argument came in here. I think at a certain point of time, we also need to discuss about public funding. Because the public funding is related to the enablement and the possibility of use cases. And if we position in the early public discussion of this whole topic, everything is very elitarian. Airport to city centers for business people, exclusive elitarian shuttles instead of business jets. Do we really think we achieve acceptance by the wider public? There is no connection for that. Most of people cannot afford that. Most of people cannot do that. And I know it's very difficult cost-wise and business case-wise to go for a democratized use case like in the commuting area. But then we also have to speak about public funding. Tell me any railway system on this planet which would be profitable without public funding. Prices would be so enormous with all of these infrastructure costs in railway-based systems that people will not be able to afford that. And yes, also we aim for megacities, we aim for very populated areas, but what I personally think is a super interesting use case, think about all these 10,000s of villages out there where people leave, where young people go away, where a few hundred or maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people are left. You operate a train station with a lot of public money to maintain 1 hour per or per day each hour a train with 5 wagons to drive 5 people around. How much money this costs. And with eVTOLs, you don't need a lot of infrastructure, especially if you're outside of the densely populated areas. And that's a fantastic use case to democratize, to make it available for the wider public with a reasonable pricing, at the same time improve the passenger experience and most probably also reduce the costs. This is the things we need to talk about, not safety. Safety has to be given. It's nothing to be discussed about.
Maybe if I'd like to, or I would like to add 2 points here. One is on the pricing and the public funding issue, and one is what you've mentioned about the seamless customer journey in the end. So I mean, if you look at advanced air mobility, and if you look at all these aircrafts here, having capacity of 2 passengers or 4 passengers, or Lilium with 6 passengers, then I mean, it's from at least our point of view, it's obvious that this is not a mass transportation mode, but it's rather catered to what we would call within Lufthansa to the Horn and Circle, to the Horn Circle members or the senators within the Miles and More program. So it's rather the high-end premium customers. And the question is, or what you've just said, should we get public funding? Then is, from my point of view, would rather hinder public acceptance, because it's not the majority that would actually benefit by that type of mobility, at least in the beginning. And from my point of view, that would not be the right direction to go, to be honest. Because the public funding should rather than be invested into something that supports the majority of the user in the end, and that's not at least what we see with AAM at the beginning. As I said, at the beginning. And maybe one more on the economic or on the pricing issue. So we did a lot of economic viability models in-house, looked at how much do we have to charge like a passenger if he uses an intra-city shuttle, an airport shuttle, or an intercity shuttle. And yes, the intercity shuttle was the most convenient or the most affordable one, but in the end you also have to consider it's like, let's say it's a 100-mile route, and you have to charge, I don't know, $3 to $4 per mile. In the end, that translates into $300 to $400 per trip. And if you then compare to, let's say, a high-speed train in Germany, Hamburg to Berlin, for example, which you usually get a ticket, like a flexible ticket for 40 euros, then it's obvious that it's not something that the average person who earns 2.2K per month of net income in Germany is able to afford on a regular basis. And But for me, this is also not a big surprise, because if you look at other innovations, like you name it, like electric vehicles with Tesla, it always starts with a premium product to showcase to the public how it works, that it is attractive in the end, and then it spills over down the road into more the mass market. So for me, it's more, okay, we start in a high premium segment, but we need to somehow include the whole public so that's actually accepted. And then down the road, hopefully we actually transition to like this more mass transportation.
If you allow me a short reply, just to be clear, I didn't say we should publicly fund with taxpayers' money elitarian use cases like airport shuttles for business people. I said we should discuss about public money for democratized use cases, like in villages and connecting rural and decentralized areas with central areas to benefit the wider public. Just to give you an idea, speaking about Austria, since I'm an Austrian guy, our public railway transports 280 million people per year. We fund it with 5 billion euro of taxpayers' money without any infrastructure investments, which is 10, 20 billion more. And out of these 280 million people which are transported each year, only 30% are the long distance. The rest is rural commuting. And so you can imagine how much public money is going there to support people in decentralized areas. And this is what I said we should discuss about to make it affordable for the wider public.
Yeah, and I totally agree that what you said, Andreas, as well, and many of you here. Safety is given. It will be given once the aircraft is certified. Otherwise, it will not fly ever in the sky. And especially in Europe, safety levels are so high, the highest among all the regulations around the world, right? So the aircraft which will fly here, basically, if they have a technical failure, they will still need to be able to fly to the next vertiport and land there under control, not emergency landing, right? So the safety levels are there, and they will be just given. So we should really talk about how to educate the people about the benefits. And this, again, has to do with accessibility. And one probably early use case which will add to people desiring this kind of mobility, not just accepting and not just enduring it, but actually wishing for it could be, medical use cases where we can provide quick first aid, so we can transport. We cannot transport a full medical equipment for first aid support. But what we can do is, in remote areas, we can bring doctors very quickly to the area of the accident or to remote areas where there is no doctors available to provide first aid support. We can transport light medical equipment, blood supplies, whatever is needed, to the place where it's needed, very fast, very cheap, quite sustainable, you know all that. But the speed is here the relevant point. I mean, you need 3 hours to get from Paris City to Le Bourget. During that time, people die. The first 20 minutes are crucial. So if we can use these early use cases to communicate the benefits of this kind of mobility, definitely there will be spillover effects also for the general mobility and general desirability of our eVTOLs.
I just want to chime in on a couple of key points with respect to cost and utilization of the aircraft. I'll speak about the United States first because the data is very easy to get. But in the US, there are 5,000 airports that go across the country, which means that most people in the United States live within about a 10 to 20 minute drive of an airport. Currently, we're only using 200 of those airports for regular commercial air travel, and there's 3,000 airports that could be used to service local communities. Now, I just have to point out the fact that we're making an airplane, not a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So for us, runways are very important. So we're definitely focused on that. Having said that, I come here on this panel supporting sustainability. So I'm going to talk about the maybe unpopular things about sustainability. I'm going to talk about safety because I think they're very important. But for a minute, I think we want to talk about economics. And when you look at the electric aircraft, the electric airplane, the word electric really matters. So when you go from using conventional fossil fuels to power an aircraft in today's market, and you switch that out with electricity derived from the grid, you're going to get anywhere between a 30 to 70% savings on energy cost, right? That's how much cheaper electricity is. Now, look, we all know that it fluctuates from time to time, but even still, it is almost every day cheaper to use electrical power than fossil fuels. In terms of social acceptance and public acceptance, the topic of this panel, In France, we've just seen the banning of any short-range flights. So, think about anybody coming here from Bordeaux, for instance. 4 years ago, you could have flown in, and now you can't, right? So now you can't. Now you have to find a different way to get to Paris, to get to the Bourget. With the electric aircraft, right, whether it's eVTOL or CTOL or in any form, again, because it produces no emissions, you're exempt from those bans. So hopefully in 2027, when we're here, you'll be able to fly on, the Aviation Alice from Bordeaux to Le Bourget and enjoy the show. But because of the fact that we've reduced the cost of operation by switching out the expensive to maintain turbine engines and the high cost of fuel, you're actually going to see CASM, or cost per available seat mile, be dramatically reduced versus some of those cases that we were just referring to. So rather than the $2-3 CASM that you would get on a small turbine aircraft, it's actually very easy to show that with a 9-passenger airplane flying these routes, you can actually get a CASM that's well below $1, right? So that $400 ticket actually becomes a $150 ticket, and then it's much more accessible. And when you actually factor in the real human cost, and you think about all of the travel that we've done to get here, when you can do an efficient flight that's 45 minutes in duration, so go to your local airport that's 10 minutes from your house, and in the case of Le Bourget, fly directly here and then walk to the show, you might actually eliminate the need for a hotel stay. Or if there's people who work in 2 different cities who actually occupy 2 different homes, you might actually eliminate the need for the second home, make more housing available. I mean, there's all sorts of knock-on effects that happen here. So there's so many positive benefits of actually going to the electric and sustainable model. I think this one thing that was hit on that I think we can all agree on is actually that aviation, access to aviation is an economic benefiter, right? So it's a causal effect to have access to an airport, access to air travel actually raises the local economy wherever you are. So increasing access to air travel will actually have a disproportionately positive benefit on small communities. So whether it's an eVTOL linking a village that has difficult access to a larger city so that people can work in the city and live in the country, or in our case, the CTOL, linking regional activities, whether it's allowing people to get where they want to go more accessibly, or actually even allowing for the delivery of cargo. By increasing access and by reducing the costs associated with it by the more efficient energy source, we will actually see direct benefits to people.
So we all understand how important safety is in aviation, and these are very important discussions to have. But members of the public often respond most to emotional narratives. What can the industry do to shape the public narrative around advanced air mobility in a way that is going to bring people on board and help eliminate some of that skepticism that may be there?
Well, this is a good start. I mean, that is really great that we have this focus of Paris Air Show, and we have the public days coming up from tomorrow. So there will be, I think, most of people coming tomorrow will be seeing the aircraft for the first time and experiencing it. And as I mentioned before, visibility, making actually, bringing it out of science fiction into real life is the first important step for that. But also we're discussing with industry associations where we as an industry should reach out and create communicational campaigns for a broader awareness, because most of the people don't actually know that eVTOLs exist. So we're talking about them being skeptical, but when you talk, like in my surrounding, when I ask randomly people, just 1 out of 20 maybe will be even aware that air taxis is here to come very, very soon. So we need to start at this first step and really raise awareness first before we talk about them flying with it.
Actually, if I can just chime in, because there's a second step that I think is very important. There's a gap here between we as manufacturers and the industry, and actually you represent the gap at Lufthansa because you're part of an airline. Right. So in the case of, in a positive way, to speak clear, we have customers, right? We have people who are buying aircraft from us and then putting them into service. Aviation, we've actually sold over 500 aircraft right now. So that's definitely a good sign of acceptance. But we've sold them to people like Air New Zealand and DHL, DHL for cargo, right? The idea of being able to do quiet cargo. EV Aero, which is a German company that wants to connect intracity travel inside Germany using, again, clean, affordable, zero-emission aircraft. So we actually have some really strong advocates in the industry. People who are out there saying, look, we want to change. And beyond just this part of advanced air mobility, the broader sustainable elements are seeing a lot of net advocacy, whether it's United Airlines or even American Airlines, or I could list the whole gamut. There are tons of accessible people and accessible companies that are accessible to people, pardon me, who are actually there pushing forward with what we're doing here. So I would say that part of what we need to do is work with our customers to make sure that the same message is getting across to the public about why this is good.
Yeah, I would add the way we think of this industry, we think of it as three components to the industry. There are the makers, the organizations that are innovating, building the aircraft, building the product that's going to be operated. Then there is the operators, like you talked about, the airlines, for example, that would take advantage of this. Then there is also what we call the regulators, the agencies that are defining the rules for operation, the compliance agencies, the city governments, the airports. I think for this to come together and become reality, it's all of those three participants in the industry working together. So you talked about, of course, you're making the product that's beautiful. Everybody's going to look at it. They're going to feel it for the first time. Check the box on that. Hopefully we'll have the airlines talking about it. We're seeing it in the United States. United Airlines had a big ad playing on their screens when you're flying, when they're talking about their partnership with, in this case, Archer Aviation. The third angle to this is what I heard in this show here. We have a couple of events coming up in the world. There's the Paris Olympics coming up. Then there is the Expo in Osaka coming up in 2 years. The Los Angeles Olympics, now that's Hollywood, right? Now that the reach of that is huge. That's coming up in a few years, so 4 years from next year. So those are the events where you bring this coalition of all these players in the market. And I heard yesterday that there's going to be use of this technology to transport people during the Paris Olympics. That is going to be a milestone event in my mind. I think that's the coalition of all these parties coming together to bring this to reality. It's going to be shown on a large scale. There's going to be lots of positive press that's going to come out of that. Everybody's seeing it in real life. I think those are the type of events I think that'll help us get to the acceptance.
If I just may add very quickly to that, being a marketeer, this is a classical marketing task, right? So basically, get a celebrity to fly the aircraft, make good videos, and people will become aware and would want to do it as well. So we need to find some really cool people to promote in this.
Top Gun, that's a hint.
Well, I think most of the answers to that question already has been given. And we spoke about creating connections, we spoke about addressing the right topics in the public discussions, and we spoke about the necessity to demonstrate and fly, let the people touch, feel, experience. What I would like to add to that is collaboration. What do I mean here? Our industry is not in competition at this stage. We don't have a market yet. We're building it. And we have to collaborate. We have to work together. We need the right umbrella organizations and associations to support that in that. We need public campaigning to convince the wider public and help each other to bake this cake together. At the end of the day, there will be enough slices for everybody.
Yeah, maybe one last quick comment. So I would believe that if the industry gets a trusted partner on board, similar to United with Archer, or if Lufthansa would even enter the market officially, that would provide, at least to certain customer groups, a very high rate of acceptance and trustworthiness, because everybody knows Lufthansa, United, and any airline is putting safety at the top line. And there are people who simply choose to fly with a given airline like Lufthansa or United simply because they have a perceived feeling that these carriers are safer or put more focus on safety than others. So if these airlines are entering the market and partner up with eVTOL OEMs, I think that would be quite a good message for the public and for potential customers.
Got 1 minute left if anyone wants to closing remarks.
I just want to add, you all said that also, and we see it here. It is a collaborative approach, and it's not just the OEMs; it's the whole industry, which needs really to work on the same direction, same messaging, and then collaboration. What you mentioned, Andreas, will help us to open doors and minds and hearts of the general public for our aircrafts.
I often get asked what my favorite plane is, right? So I've been a long time in the aerospace industry. And we're talking about making connections with the people who are going to use our product. And so when you ask me what my favorite airplane is, what I will tell you is whatever airplane I'm on when I'm going home to go back to my family. And so our mission here is to make sure that we connect people and we use the technology that we have to make that happen.
It's my final statement. It's not a sprint, but a marathon. And let's not build Ferraris, but the Volkswagen.
Excellent. Well, that's all we had time for. A round of applause for our panelists, please.